Cut the rope at last second. Rancher saved a girl from being hanged. Cowboy love stories. Red Mesa was the kind of town that pretended it was tough because the world around it was tougher. The frontier planet, Kestrel 9, was mostly red dust, sharp wind, and long empty stretches where the sky looked too big to belong to anyone. Cargo ships crossed that sky like slow, bright insects, blinking as they carried ore and supplies between far-off stations. The town sat in the middle of all that open space like a nail driven into the ground, small, stubborn, and certain it was important. Elias Kane lived far enough from town that the noise never reached him unless he went looking for it. He ran a ranch the old way, with a modern twist. His cattle were a mix of living stock and smart herdbots, metal frames shaped like steers, designed to survive heat, sand, and long distances without water. Solar fencing drew clean lines across the land, and wind turbines turned on the ridge behind his house, humming low like a sleeping animal. Elias was not the kind of man who enjoyed crowds. He was tall, quiet, and careful with his words. People in Red Mesa said he had a cold heart, but that wasn't true. His heart simply didn't belong to the town anymore. Once, years ago, he had worn a badge for another colony on another planet. He had learned the hard way that law could be bent by money and fear until it broke. After that, he had chosen the ranch. Out here, the rules were simple: keep the herd safe, keep the fences working, and never ignore a storm. That morning, the sky was clean and pale. Elias loaded his saddlebag with a list in his head: feed cartridges, water filters, medicine for a sick calf, and rode his hoverbike toward town. The bike skimmed over the ground, kicking up dust in a wide fan. His hat sat low on his brow to block the sun, and his scarf covered his mouth against the grit. By the time he reached Red Mesa, he knew something was wrong. He heard the noise before he saw it. Not laughter, not trade talk, not the normal busy sound of a market day. This was sharper, tighter, like a rope drawn too far. He eased the bike into a quiet spot near the supply store and walked toward the center of town. People pressed in around the square, forming a ring. Elias slowed, letting his eyes scan faces, hands, and weapons. The deputies were out. So was Sheriff Calder Voss. Voss stood on the wooden platform beside the old courthouse, looking proud and calm. He wore his long coat like it made him taller than everyone else. His badge caught the sun, flashing bright. Two deputies stood behind him, rifles across their chests. And in the center of the platform stood a young woman. A rope circled her neck. Elias stopped so suddenly his boots scraped the dirt. The woman's hands were bound, but she stood straight. Dust clung to her dark hair, and her clothes looked like they had been dragged through days of trouble. Her face was pale with exhaustion, yet her eyes were awake, wide, alert, and searching the crowd like she was looking for one good reason to believe anyone could still be decent. Elias' jaw tightened. He didn't know her. But he knew the look of a person who had been pushed into a corner by people who wanted a quick ending. Sheriff Voss raised his hands, and the crowd quieted. "Red Mesa," he announced, "today we bring order back to our streets." Murmurs moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "This woman," Voss continued, "is Mara Venn. She came to our town with a sweet story and a hidden blade, sabotage in the mine tunnels, a broken oxygen line, a disabled security grid, 3 men injured. A month of lost work." Mara's chest lifted with a slow breath. She didn't shout, she didn't beg, she just watched. Elias studied Voss's face. The sheriff's voice was smooth, almost practiced. Elias had heard that kind of voice before, the voice of someone telling a story he didn't have to believe because the crowd would believe it for him. Elias looked around again. Most people looked angry. Some looked scared. A few looked uncertain but didn't want to stand out. He stepped closer until he could see the rope clearly, until he could see how the knot had been tied. Mara turned her head slightly, and for the smallest moment her gaze met Elias'. Her eyes didn't ask for pity, they asked for a chance. Elias felt something hard and steady settle inside him. Not excitement, not pride, responsibility. Voss continued, "We cannot let outsiders destroy what we've built. We cannot let soft hearts weaken this colony. Justice must be clear. Justice must be swift." Mara spoke then, her voice rough but controlled. "I didn't do it." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. That was what made it strong. Voss smiled like he'd been waiting for it. "Of course you didn't," he said, mocking without raising his volume. "They never do." Elias' hand drifted toward his belt where his sidearm rested under his coat. He wasn't planning trouble. He was planning truth, but truth didn't usually survive a crowd. The deputy at the lever adjusted his grip. The rope creaked slightly as he tested it. Elias' mind moved fast. If he tried to climb the platform, he would be shot before he reached the steps. If he shouted, the crowd would shout back. If he did nothing, the town would cheer, and a woman would be erased from the world in the name of order. Elias made a decision with the same calm he used when a fence line snapped in a storm. He stepped back, slipping into the thin space between bodies. He moved like he belonged there, like he was just another man watching. He found a clear line of sight to the rope, not to Mara, not to the deputy, but to the exact place where the rope held the weight. He drew his sidearm under his coat, hidden by his sleeve. His breathing slowed. The deputy's hand tightened on the lever. Voss lifted his chin. "May this be a warning." The lever began to move. Elias fired. The shot cracked through the air, sharp and clean. The crowd screamed and ducked. The rope snapped, split by the bullet at the perfect point. The knot whipped loose and Myra dropped, hard but not far, onto the platform's boards. For half a heartbeat, the square went silent. Then everything exploded into motion. "Gun!" someone yelled. "Get him!" Another voice roared. Deputies raised rifles. People shoved and ran. Voss's calm shattered into anger. Elias was already moving. He vaulted onto the platform from the side, grabbed Myra under her arms, and hauled her up before anyone could react. She coughed, pulling in air in short, shaky breaths. "Can you stand?" Elias asked, low and quick. Myra nodded once, though her legs wobbled. Elias wrapped an arm around her and moved fast, steering her toward the side steps. A deputy lunged, but Elias kicked the man's boot out from under him, not to injure, just to slow. The deputy fell with a grunt. Elias didn't stay to argue. He wasn't here to win a debate. He was here to keep her alive. They hit the ground running. "Elias Kane," Voss shouted, voice cracking with fury. "You just signed your death warrant." Elias ignored him. He pulled Mara through the shifting crowd, using his size to create a path. Mara clung to him, trying to keep up. Her wrists were still bound, and she stumbled. "Bike," Elias said. "We're leaving." Shots rang out, not close enough to hit, but close enough to push fear into the air. Elias heard a bullet strike a wooden post, splintering it. People screamed again and scattered. He reached his hoverbike. With one hand, he opened the saddlebag latch and tossed supplies aside. With the other, he pushed Mara onto the seat behind him. "Hold on," he ordered. Mara wrapped her arms around his waist tight. Elias felt her trembling against him. He punched the ignition. The bike surged forward, lifting and skimming over dirt and stones. Deputies ran after them, but the bike was faster. A patrol drone rose from behind the courthouse, its lights blinking. Elias swore under his breath and leaned the bike hard, sending it between two buildings where the drone couldn't follow quickly. They burst out of town's back edge into open land. The wind grabbed at them, cold despite the sun. The red plains rolled out in waves, broken by rocks and tough shrubs that survived on almost nothing. Elias kept the bike low and fast, heading toward the canyon cut that led back to his ranch. Behind them, the town became smaller, but the danger did not. A drone hummed in the distance, tracking. Elias reached down and switched his bike's signal to silent mode. Its lights dimmed. The engine tone dropped. He turned into the canyon where the walls rose high, blocking scanning beams from the sky. Only then did he breathe a little easier. Mara's arms loosened slightly around him. You didn't have to do that," she managed. Elias kept his eyes ahead. "Yes," he said, "I did." "Why?" Her voice was thin. "You don't even know me." He slowed the bike as the canyon widened into a path of scrubland. His ranch was still a good distance away, but now they had cover. "I know a setup when I see one," Elias replied. "And I know what happens when a crowd decides it's easier to blame one person than face a bigger truth." Mara swallowed. "They said I sabotaged the mine. Did you?" "No." Her answer came fast, like it had been waiting for someone to finally ask. "I found something. Something they didn't want found. I tried to leave and they caught me. The sheriff, he made it into a story people could swallow." Elias' grip tightened on the controls. He had suspected. Now he was sure, if Sheriff Voss was lying, it wasn't just about one woman. It was about power, and power did not forgive being challenged. Ahead, Elias' ranch came into view, a small house, a barn, wind turbines turning, solar fences glowing faintly in the sun. For years, it had been his quiet corner of the universe. Now it was a hiding place. And maybe, if he was smart, a battlefield, one fought with proof, not rage. Elias brought the bike in and stopped behind the barn where the fence line curved, out of sight from the sky. He helped Myra down carefully. She wobbled again, then steadied herself, jaw set like she refused to fall apart in front of him. Elias nodded once, approval without words. "Inside," he said. "We cut those ropes off your wrists. You eat, you rest. Then you tell me everything you know." Myra looked toward the horizon, where Red Mesa sat like a dark dot against the bright land. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed back fear. "They'll come," she whispered. Elias followed her gaze, calm but serious. "I know." He opened the ranch house door and guided her in, already listening for the distant hum of engines, already planning the next moves. Because out here, on a frontier world where justice could be bought, one clean shot had changed everything. And Elias Kane would not let the truth be hanged. The ranch house was small but strong, built from metal panels and reinforced wood brought in from another colony. Inside, everything was simple and clean. A narrow table stood near the kitchen unit. Two chairs faced each other like they were used to quiet conversations. A rack of tools hung by the wall, and a screen panel showed the ranch's outer camera feeds in soft blue light. Myra sat on one of the chairs while Elias cut the rope from her wrists. The marks on her skin were red and deep. She did not complain. She only flexed her fingers slowly, as if reminding herself they were still hers. Elias handed her a glass of water. "Drink," he said. She did, carefully at first, then in long gulps. He placed a bowl of warm stew in front of her. She hesitated. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "You can still send me away." Elias leaned back against the counter, arms folded. "If I wanted you gone, I would have left you in that square." Myra lowered her eyes for a moment, then began to eat. Hunger made her movements fast, but she forced herself to slow down. Outside, the wind brushed against the metal walls. Inside, the air felt tight with unspoken questions. After a few minutes, Elias walked to the wall screen and checked the perimeter. The solar fences were active. The barn doors were sealed. The herd bots grazed calmly in the distance, their sensors glowing faintly as they monitored the land. "No patrol yet," he said. "But they'll look." Myra wiped her mouth and sat straighter. "They won't stop. Sheriff Voss can't afford to let me talk." "Then start talking," Elias replied. Myra took a breath. "I'm a systems analyst. I worked for the Helix Mining Company on the orbital station above this planet. My job was to monitor output and energy flow from the mines." Elias nodded slowly. He had heard of Helix, big company, deep pockets. "At first, everything looked normal," she continued. "Crystal extraction, standard processing, safe limits, but 3 weeks ago the numbers changed. Energy spikes, hidden shipments, extra transport codes that weren't listed in public logs." Elias stepped closer, listening carefully. "I traced the codes," Mara said. "The crystals they're pulling from Kestrel 9 aren't just fuel grade. Some of them are unstable. If refined differently, they can release massive energy bursts, not for power plants, for weapons." The word hung in the room. "Weapons?" Elias repeated. Myra nodded. "Illegal ones. Planet-level damage if used wrong. They're testing extraction methods that make the ground weaker. That's why the tunnel collapsed last week. They blamed faulty equipment. It was overload." Elias remembered the town talk about the accident. 3 miners injured. "Bad luck," they'd said. "I copied the data," Mara said softly. "I thought I could send it to central oversight, but someone noticed. My access was shut down. Security picked me up before I could leave orbit." "And they sent you planetside," Elias guessed. "Yes." "Sheriff Voss was waiting. He told the town I sabotaged the tunnels to hurt profits. It was easier than explaining what's really happening." Elias studied her face. She didn't look like someone spinning a story. She looked tired, frightened, determined. "You have proof?" he asked. Myra nodded again. "Not on me. They scanned everything, but I hid a backup." "Where?" "In the mine." Elias let out a slow breath. That complicated things. Before he could answer, a soft alarm beeped from the wall screen. Both of them turned at once. A small drone icon blinked red on the display. "They're scanning," Elias said. On the live feed, a patrol drone hovered high above the ridge. Its search beam swept the land in slow arcs. It wasn't close yet, but it was looking. Myra's shoulders tensed. "I told you." Elias moved quickly. He shut down external lights and reduced power output from visible systems. The ranch's signal signature dropped on the display. "They'll check the obvious routes first," he said calmly. "I didn't take the obvious route." The drone drifted past, scanning the canyon entrance, then turning back toward town. For now they were safe. Mara exhaled shakily. "You're good at this." "I used to be better," Elias replied. He returned to the table and sat across from her. "If the proof is in the mine, we need it." Mara looked at him, surprised. "We? You think I cut that rope just to hide?" he said evenly. "If what you're saying is true, that town is sitting on a powder keg." She hesitated. "Going back means walking into their hands." "Maybe," Elias said, "but walking away means letting them hang the next person who asks questions." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of decision. Mara straightened. "The backup is in a maintenance hub below Sector 3. Hidden inside an old diagnostic unit. It's offline so it won't ping their systems. You can reach it?" "Yes, if we get inside." Elias stood and walked to a metal cabinet near the door. He opened it and revealed 2 rifles, spare power cells, and a compact field kit. "We don't rush," he said. "We prepare." The rest of the day passed in focused work. Mara helped him reinforce the barn doors and recalibrate the automated turrets mounted along the fence posts. She surprised him by quickly understanding the ranch systems. Her hands moved with confidence over control panels, adjusting sensitivity and range. "You weren't lying about being an analyst," Elias said. A small smile touched her face. "Numbers tell stories, most people just don't listen." As the sun lowered, painting the sky orange and purple, Elias led her to the far field where the herd bots stood. "These units can patrol at night," he explained. "I'll reroute their paths closer to the house." Mara watched the machines move in slow, steady patterns. "You built this place alone?" "Yes." "Why?" Elias didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Because out here I choose what's right, no boardrooms, no politics." Mara nodded, understanding more than he expected. Night fell fully. Stars filled the sky in thick clusters. The ranch lights stayed low. Inside, they sat at the table again, maps spread out between them. Elias traced the route from his ranch to the mine. "There's a service tunnel here," he said, tapping a spot on the screen. "Old access point, mostly forgotten." Mara leaned closer. He could feel her tension, but also her courage. "If we move before dawn," she said, "security rotations will be thinner." A sudden sharp sound cut through the room, not the soft beep of a drone, a louder alarm. Elias was on his feet instantly. On the wall screen, 3 ground vehicles appeared at the edge of his property, headlights cutting through darkness. "They found us," Mara whispered. The vehicles stopped just beyond the solar fence line. Doors opened. Armed figures stepped out. Sheriff Voss's voice echoed faintly across the wind through a loudspeaker. "Elias Kane," he called, "you've made a mistake. Bring the girl out and we'll forget your little stunt in town." Elias' expression did not change. "Stay inside," he told Mara. She shook her head. "I won't hide while you face them alone." He studied her for a second, then handed her a compact rifle. "Safety S on, don't fire unless they cross the fence." Outside, Voss paced near the vehicles. "This doesn't have to get ugly," the sheriff continued. "You know how this works. She's dangerous, you don't want to be part of this." Elias stepped out onto the porch, rifle resting low but ready. "You forgot one thing," Elias called back. Voss tilted his head. "What's that?" "I don't scare easy." Voss's smile faded. He gestured to one of his men. A device was rolled forward, a portable shield emitter designed to overload simple defenses. "They think I'm simple," Elias muttered under his breath. He tapped a control on his wrist unit. The herd bots in the field shifted direction. Their metal frames moved into formation along the fence, sensors glowing brighter. Hidden defense nodes rose from the ground between them. The deputies hesitated. Voss's voice hardened. "Last chance, Kane." Elias stood firm. Behind him, inside the doorway, Mara stood straight, no longer looking like someone waiting to be saved. "You want her?" Elias replied calmly. "Come through me." The shield emitter powered up, sending a pulse toward the fence. The fence flared bright blue, holding. At the same moment, Elias activated the outer turrets. Warning shots struck the dirt in front of the deputies' boots, precise and controlled. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Voss's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected resistance this strong. After a tense pause, he raised a hand. "Fine," he called coldly. "Enjoy your little fortress, Kane, but you can't hide forever." The vehicles backed away slowly, dust rising around them as they retreated into the dark. Elias did not lower his rifle until they were gone from sight. Inside, Myra released a breath she had been holding for too long. "They'll bring more next time," she said. "I know," Elias replied. He shut down the turrets and turned to her. "That means we move first." Mara nodded, determination replacing fear in her eyes. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the land. Inside the ranch, under quiet light and steady resolve, two people prepared not just to survive, but to fight back with the truth. Before sunrise, the ranch felt different. The air was cooler, the sky dark blue with the first hint of light growing along the horizon. Elias moved quietly through the barn, checking gear one last time. He believed in preparation more than luck. His hoverbike stood ready, power cells fully charged. Two saddlebags hung on either side, filled with tools, food packs, spare ammo, and a small medical kit. Mara stepped out of the house wearing a jacket Elias had given her. It was slightly too large, but she didn't complain. Her expression was focused now. The fear she carried before had changed into something steadier purpose. "You ready?" Elias asked. She nodded. "As I'll ever be." He handed her a small communicator. "Short range only. The mind blocks long signals, but this will keep us connected if we split up." Mara clipped it to her collar. "Thank you." They mounted the hoverbike together, and Elias guided it across the field, staying low and fast. The herd bots watched silently as they passed, their glowing sensors turning to follow. As the ranch disappeared behind them, Mara glanced back once. It had already started to feel safe, like something she didn't want to lose. The journey to the mine took nearly 2 hours. They avoided main roads, choosing narrow rock paths and dry riverbeds instead. The land changed slowly as they moved closer to the mining zone. The soil became darker, streaked with shining fragments of crystal dust. Tall metal towers rose from the ground ahead, blinking with warning lights. Elias slowed the bike as they reached a ridge overlooking the facility. The mine stretched wide, carved deep into the planet like a scar. Massive machines crawled along the edges, lifting loads of crystal into waiting cargo containers. Security drones moved in careful patterns, scanning every entrance. Mara studied the scene. "They increased patrols," she said quietly. "Expected," Elias replied. "After yesterday." She pointed toward a smaller structure near the outer wall. "That's Sector 3, maintenance access should be below it." Elias scanned the terrain, searching for the old service tunnel he had mentioned. After a moment, he spotted a rusted hatch half covered by sand and stone. "There," he said. They parked the bike behind a group of broken rocks and approached the hatch carefully. Elias checked for alarms before pulling it open. A narrow ladder dropped into darkness below. Mara swallowed but stepped forward first. "This leads to an unused tunnel. Security rarely checks it." Elias followed her down. The air inside smelled dry and metallic. Emergency lights flickered along the walls, casting long shadows. Their footsteps echoed softly as they moved deeper. "Stay close," Elias said. Mara nodded, guiding him through turns and intersections she remembered from her earlier work. Every sound made her tense, but she kept moving. As they approached the maintenance hub, voices echoed from around a corner. Elias raised a hand, signaling stop. Two workers stood nearby, talking quietly. Their uniforms were dusty and their faces looked tired. "They're pushing extraction harder," one said. "Tunnel stability's dropping." "Doesn't matter," the other replied. "Orders come from above." Elias waited until they walked away before continuing. Myra led him into a small room filled with old equipment. A broken console leaned against the wall, wires exposed. "That's it," she whispered. She knelt beside the unit and opened a hidden panel. Inside, a small data drive rested behind loose cables. Relief crossed her face as she removed it. "Still here." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "Good." But before they could leave, a sharp alarm sounded through the tunnel. Red lights flashed. "They know we're here," Mara said, panic rising. Elias grabbed her arm gently. "Stay calm. Which way?" "Left corridor leads to loading bays," she answered quickly. "More exits." They ran. Footsteps echoed behind them as security teams moved into position. Elias guided them through side passages, using shadows and corners to stay hidden. Twice they pressed against walls while guards passed only meters away. Mara's breathing grew heavy, but she refused to slow. At the loading bay, huge cargo containers stood stacked like metal towers. Machinery hummed as automated loaders moved silently. Elias looked around. "Too open," he said. "We need cover." Suddenly, Sheriff Voss stepped into view from the far side, flanked by two armed deputies. "I had a feeling you'd come back," Voss said calmly. Myra froze. Elias stepped slightly in front of her. "Drop the drive," Voss ordered. Myra tightened her grip on it instead. You framed me, she said, voice shaking but strong. People could die because of what you're doing. Voss sighed as if bored. Progress always costs something. Elia's eyes hardened. You're risking the entire colony. And saving it from poverty, Voss replied sharply. Helix pays well. People here need jobs more than truth. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Elias moved. He knocked over a nearby crate, sending metal pieces crashing loudly. The noise startled the deputies long enough for him to grab Mara's hand and pull her behind cover. Shots echoed, striking containers instead of flesh. They ran between towering stacks, dodging machines and slipping through narrow gaps. Elias guided them toward an exit ramp leading upward. Behind them, Voss shouted orders. At the top of the ramp, sunlight poured in. They burst outside into open air. Alarms continued to scream across the facility. Elias spotted a parked utility vehicle and rushed toward it. He forced the door open and activated the engine. Get in! Mara climbed inside as he drove fast toward the outer fence. Security drones chased them, beams flashing. Hold tight, Elias said. He steered sharply, avoiding barriers, then drove straight through a maintenance gate before it fully closed. Once outside, he abandoned the vehicle and led Mara toward the hidden canyon path where the hoverbike waited. They reached it just as a drone appeared overhead. Elias activated the bike and it launched forward, racing across the plains. The wind roared past them as the mine grew smaller behind. Mara clutched the data drive tightly against her chest. We did it, she said breathlessly. Elias didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the horizon. They won't let this go, he said finally. I know. She leaned closer, voice softer now. But now we have proof. Elias felt the weight of that word. Proof meant hope. It also meant danger. As the ranch came back into view, he slowed slightly. What happens next? Mara asked. He thought for a moment. We stop running, he said. We take this back to Red Mesa. Mara stared at him in surprise. That's their territory. It's our home too, Elias replied calmly, and the truth belongs there. She watched him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. For the first time since the execution platform, a small smile touched her face. Not from relief, from trust. Behind them, the mine continued its work like nothing had changed. But ahead of them, the path led back to the town where everything began. And this time, they would return not as fugitives, but with the power to change the story. The road back to Red Mesa felt longer than before. Elias kept the hoverbike steady as it skimmed over the red plains. Dust trailed behind them like a fading shadow. The wind pushed against his coat, but his mind stayed clear. He had made his decision. Running had never been his style, and now they had something stronger than weapons. They had truth. Mara sat behind him, holding the data drive close as if it were fragile glass. The ride was quiet but not heavy. Fear still existed, but it was mixed with determination. The early morning sun rose slowly, turning the sky gold and lighting the town in the distance. Red Mesa looked peaceful from far away. Up close, Elias knew it was not. As they reached the outskirts, he slowed the bike. You still sure about this? He asked. Mara nodded without hesitation. If we hide, they win. If we speak, maybe someone listens. Elias gave a small, approving nod. They rode straight down the main road instead of sneaking through back paths. People began to notice immediately. Conversations stopped. Faces turned. Some pointed. Others stepped aside, unsure whether to be angry or curious. Word spread fast. By the time they reached the town square, a crowd had already gathered. The same platform stood there, the one where Mara had nearly lost her life. The rope was gone now, but the memory of it felt strong in the air. Sheriff Voss stood near the courthouse, flanked by deputies. His expression darkened when he saw them. Well, he said loudly, the runaway rancher returns. Elias parked the hoverbike calmly and helped Mara down. He did not reach for his weapon. He kept his hands visible, relaxed. Mara stepped forward beside him. She looked nervous but strong. Voss walked closer, smiling without warmth. You just made this easier, now I don't have to hunt you. Elias met his gaze. We're not here to run, the crowd murmured. Voss's eyes narrowed. Then why are you here? Mara lifted the data drive slightly. Because the truth belongs to them, she said, gesturing toward the people around them. The sheriff laughed softly. Truth, or another story to save yourself? Elias turned toward the crowd instead of answering Voss directly. He spoke clearly, his voice steady. This woman was accused of sabotage, he said. But the mine is hiding something bigger, dangerous crystal extraction, illegal shipments, environmental risk. Some people shook their heads, unwilling to believe. Others listened carefully. Voss clapped slowly, mocking. "Big claims, no proof." Mara stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed firm. "I worked on the orbital station. I saw the real data. I copied everything." She held up the drive again. "This contains records of energy spikes, secret shipments, and orders signed by Helix executives," she continued. "And authorization from Sheriff Voss to suppress investigation." Gasps moved through the crowd. Voss's smile vanished for a moment before returning stronger. "Anyone can fake data." Elias nodded toward the communications tower at the edge of the square. "Then let everyone see it." The crowd turned to look. Mara walked slowly toward the public console connected to the town network. Two deputies moved to block her path, but Elias stepped forward slightly, not threatening, just firm. "We're not leaving," he said quietly. The tension grew thick. For a moment it seemed like everything might fall apart again. Then an older woman from the crowd spoke. "Let her show it," she said. "If it's lies, we'll see." Others began to agree. Voices rose, asking for proof. Voss looked around, realizing the mood had shifted. He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Myra reached the console and connected the drive. The screen flickered, then filled with data streams, charts, and recorded messages. A recording played automatically. A Helix executive's voice filled the square, speaking about increased extraction despite safety risks. Another file showed shipments labeled under hidden codes. Finally, a signed authorization appeared on screen, Voss's name attached to orders blocking oversight. Silence fell. People stared in shock. Voss's face hardened. "This is manipulated." But his voice lacked confidence now. A miner stepped forward from the crowd. "My brother was hurt in that tunnel collapse," he said slowly. "You told us it was equipment failure." Murmurs grew louder. Another voice called out. "You said she was a criminal." Myra stepped away from the console, breathing hard. She did not smile. She only watched as the truth spread across faces. Elias stayed beside her, calm and steady. Suddenly, Voss reached for his weapon. The movement was fast, but Elias was faster. He stepped between Voss and the crowd, hand hovering near his own gun without drawing it. "This ends here," Elias said quietly. The deputies hesitated, unsure whether to follow Voss's lead. The crowd now stood against the sheriff instead of behind him. Sirens echoed in the distance. Everyone turned as two large patrol ships descended from the sky, engines humming loudly. The signal Mara had secretly sent earlier from the mine had reached off-world authorities. The ships landed just beyond the square. Uniformed officers stepped out, moving directly toward the platform. "Sheriff Calder Voss," one announced, "you are under investigation for corporate collusion and suppression of oversight." The crowd parted as they approached. Voss's shoulders stiffened. He looked around, searching for support, but none came. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. Relief washed through the square like cool rain after heat. The officers secured him without violence. As they led him away, people began talking loudly, emotions shifting from anger to shock to cautious hope. Mara exhaled deeply, as if she had been holding her breath for days. "It's over," she whispered. Elias watched the scene carefully. "It's a beginning," he corrected gently. The town would need time to heal, to rebuild trust, but the truth had broken the fear that held them. A young boy approached Mara hesitantly. "You're not a criminal?" he asked. She smiled softly. "No, just someone who didn't give up." The boy nodded, satisfied, and ran back to his family. Elias felt something inside him settle, a quiet sense that he had done the right thing. Later, as the crowd slowly dispersed, the town leader thanked them for their courage. Some people apologized to Mara for believing the accusations. Others simply nodded respectfully. As the sun began to lower, Elias and Mara returned to the hoverbike. "Back to the ranch?" she asked. He nodded. They rode out together, leaving Red Mesa behind. This time the ride felt lighter. The wind carried away the tension that had followed them before. When the ranch came into view, Mara smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd feel at home anywhere again," she said. Elias stopped the bike near the barn. "Home isn't a place," he replied. "It's people you trust." She looked at him, eyes warm. The herdbots moved slowly in the field, and the turbines turned against a sky filled with stars beginning to appear. For the first time since the rope tightened around her neck, Mara felt truly safe. And for the first time in years, Elias felt like his quiet life had gained something more than peace. It had gained purpose. Together, they walked toward the house. leaving behind a past shaped by fear and stepping into a future shaped by courage, trust, and a love that grew not from rescue alone, but from standing side by side when it mattered most.